This is the Precision Adjust knife sharpener from WorkSharp. It promises precision and repeatability in sharpening your knives. Does it deliver? Let's find out. Now, before we take a look at the knife sharpener itself, I do want to tackle two myths that I often hear around. First one is a sharp knife in your kitchen is quite dangerous because you can cut yourself. Well, fact of the matter, though it might seem counterintuitive, the opposite is actually true. One of the more dangerous things you can have in your kitchen is actually a dull knife, not a sharp one. That's because with a dull knife, you have to apply a lot of force to be able to cut. Therefore, you have less control over the blade. Whatever you're cutting might slip, and this is how you end up cutting yourself. Whereas with a sharp knife, you're actually relying on the sharp blade rather on brute force to cut through things, thus by making it far safer. The second myth that I hear sometimes is I don't need to sharpen my knives. They're quite sharp, they cut quite well, or they're quite expensive, good quality knives, therefore I do not need to sharpen them. Again, no matter how expensive or great quality your knife is, you cannot defy the laws of physics. With use, eventually your blade is going to become dull. It's going to require sharpening. Now, granted, you might be able to go for longer periods before needing to sharpen it if you have a good quality knife. And there's a lot of factors that go into determining that, ranging from the material of the knife to the angle of the edge, to the cutting board that you are using and the material of that, to how you wash, store, handle your knife. But eventually, you're going to need to sharpen your knife. Which brings us to what is sharpening a knife. And this takes us to the third point, and this one is not a myth, but rather a misconception, and this is this thing, which you see chefs on cooking shows, just going down on it with their knives quickly. And this is actually a honing rod or honing steel, and this does not sharpen your knife, this hones your knife. And the difference being, when you sharpen your knife, you're actually removing material off of the knife and creating a new edge. Whereas when you're honing, you're not removing any material, you're simply realigning the edge. How do you sharpen a knife? Well, there's plenty of different ways. There's pull-through sharpeners, which I'm not a big fan of. And then there's the traditional or more common way of sharpening a knife, and that's with a whetstone. What is a whetstone, you might ask? Well, it's a stone with some kind of abrasive material on which you slide your knife, and as you slide your knife, it shaves off material off of the edge and creates a new edge, thus by sharpening your knife. Now, the tricky thing about using whetstone is that it's not easy at all to use. It requires a lot of practice and has a steep learning curve to get the technique right, to use the right angle and apply the right amount of force. Angle? Yes. Each knife has an angle at which the cutting edge is cut. But how do I know the angle of my knife, you might ask? Well, the manufacturer decides what angle the knife is manufactured at, but usually for Western style knives, like this chef's knife, the angle is between 17 and 22 degrees, whereas Eastern style knives, like this santoku for example, the angle is usually between 12 and 17 degrees. But again, if you have a knife from a known manufacturer, check their website, check the product page, because often you'll find what angle it's at. For example, this is my Zwilling chef's knife, and although it's a Western style knife, if you look at the product page on Zwilling, it clearly says that they use a 15-degree angle. So back to the whetstone, what makes it very tricky is that you need to match that angle while sliding your knife. So you need to create that 15-degree or 20-degree angle and keep it consistently as you slide down on the whetstone, applying the right amount of pressure. This could be a daunting task if you don't have the patience for it. As I said, it has a steep learning curve, so it's going to take you quite some time to master that. Or you can use something like this, which takes all the guesswork out of it, gives you a consistent angle every single time, with no learning curve, just results. Now, the way this works is quite simple. You set the angle, which can range between 15 and 30 degrees, and it comes with 3 different stones. You have a 320 grit coarse diamond stone, you have a 600 grit fine diamond stone, and you have a ceramic honing stone. You clamp your knife, just like this, set it make sure you have the right angle selected, and you start with the coarse 320 grit diamond stone and start sliding the stone from the heel of your knife up until the tip, and then go back from the tip back to the heel. Once you've done one side, turn the knife 180 degrees and do the other side from heel to tip and then back from tip to heel. Now try to be consistent in doing the same number of strokes on both sides so you have a consistent edge. Now, depending on how dull your knife is, you might need to go over it multiple times with the 320 grit coarse diamond stone. And then when you're done, repeat the same process with the 600 grit fine diamond stone. And thirdly, just go over it a few times with the ceramic honing rod and you should be good to go. So I tested this with my chef's knife, which I tried to blunt it a little bit. And as you can see with the paper test, it's tearing through the paper rather than cutting nicely and cleanly through it. And after I went over it a couple of times with the precision adjust, as you saw, I ran the paper test again, and the difference is quite noticeable. It's cutting quite cleanly through the paper. That's a big difference from how it was. Now, this is not going to be as good as using a whetstone, but I would say it's pretty darn close. And considering it needs absolutely no skill, no learning curve, no practice, I'd say it's pretty darn impressive. Now for me, the ultimate test to judge if the knife is sharp enough is to try to cut some tomatoes, because if it's not sharp enough, it's gonna squish the tomato rather than do a clean cut. And what I'm looking for here is a clean cut from the first pass. And as you can see, it's just cutting through the tomato like it was butter. That is pretty impressive. After the tomato, I cut through some onions, some mushrooms, and it's just a joy to use a sharp knife. And I think the precision adjust got my knife to pretty impressive sharpness for the effort it takes and the zero skills that it takes to sharpen it. So here are my thoughts on the precision adjust. It's gonna get your knife quite sharp. It's not gonna match the sharpness you get from a whetstone, but the skill, time, patience it takes to master using a whetstone is not insignificant. And if you're willing to do that, if you have a passion for cooking, by all means, get a whetstone and start practicing. It's a skill that I believe you should master if you are serious about the kitchen. However, if you don't have the time, the patience, or the interest in learning how to master a whetstone, I would definitely recommend the Worksharp Precision Adjust. It's going to be maybe 80-85% as good as a whetstone with 0% of the effort, so it's a no-brainer. Now, that's not to say it is perfect. Matter of fact, there are a few things I did not quite like about it, most notably the clamp which holds the knife. On bigger knives like my chef's knife, the clamp does not clamp quite securely onto the knife. I think the spine of the knife is a bit too thick, so it doesn't go all the way in, and it doesn't clamp it very securely, so the knife ends up wobbling. Not a big deal, but you need to pay attention there. Also, with a bigger knife like a chef's knife, it's hard to swivel the knife 180 degrees. Because it's gonna touch your working surface. Now what you can do then is either tilt the entire device as you swivel it so that it swivels without touching the working surface, or you can simply remove the clamp, turn it 180 degrees, and then put it back in. Not an issue, but could have been better. Now on the other hand, with smaller knives, there's also an issue. While you can swivel it 180 degrees without a problem, there's another issue over here, and that's if you go to lower angles, like 15 degrees, the stone actually hits the clamp as you slide down, as you can see right now, which makes sharpening a bit challenging. Now, none of these are deal breakers, it's just things that could have been better. Worksharp retails for around $60. I will put a link in the description. Do check the product page out to see the price at the moment you are watching this. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always, if you liked the video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel, as this encourages me to continue producing content. Until next time, cheers.